Hi, I'm Sharaad Kuttan and welcome to Let's Talk, the show that brings you the most important conversations in art, culture and ideas. And today we're going to be talking about artists and a particular book that's just come out. It's newly published. It's called A Living Art, the inspired life of 14 Malaysian artists and their practice. And Emelia Ong, the author of the book, is here with me, as well as one of the subjects of the book, one of the 14 inspired lives, Noor Mahnum Mohamed, who I've known for many years as Anum. Thank you so much for joining me today. So let's get straight to it, Emilia. Why this book? Why did you think it was necessary to put a book like this together, and how does it relate to your own practice as an artist?
Well, I think my idea for the book was to have a sort of equivalent to a documentary about art practice. So it's in between, I would say, your typical interview in the magazine. It's got more depth than the typical interview, and at the same time, it's got an art historical lens to help the reader to understand the work better. So it's not a very serious academic work. At the same time, it's very accessible, and it's also it's got enough to interest the art historian.
Okay, and we'll come back to the question of art history in a moment, because I think a lot of us don't quite understand the meaning of art history or its value in terms of appreciating art and appreciating the lives of artists. Anum, tell us, why did you decide to say yes to this invitation from Emilia?
Well, I've known Emilia for quite a long time. We were together in the same faculty or department at Lim Kok Wing Institute when I was at Taman Megah. That was 2001, 2002. I was there for like
part of the 21st century already, but it's still a long time ago.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, was it solely friendship that was the basis of your decision to say yes to her?
Yes.
Okay.
Because usually my studio is a private space. I usually don't let people go into my studio except for a few friends, and that's rarely. But when Emilia asked, sure, yeah. If there has been occasions where they need to interview me, I'll take them to an Izzat studio. I'll do it at Rimbun Jahan or a cafe or something.
Right, and that's very interesting. Again, the question of the private lives of the artists at work. I think some claim that you make in the book about demystifying practice, and I think that's very interesting. But, and I guess one little confession that I have to make first is that I did contribute to the production of this book, because
Thank you.
Record Books, with the publisher, puts out these calls for supporting a publication. And I thought, well, this is a great idea, and so I did. And one of the copies of the book went to two young ladies, friends, children of a friend of mine, and I thought this would be a great book for them because they also were getting interested in art. Let's come back to the question of art history, and in fact, the foreword's written by Dolores Wharton, and she'd done a book in 1971.
Exactly.
And so this is a book I've never seen, so I was fascinated by that. Tell us more about Dolores Wharton, why and how she plays a part in this book. Did she provide the template for it, or was there something else going on between you and the book that you wrote?
I think when I was doing my master's, I was introduced to her book by Ritza Piarasa, who was an art historian at the time in UM. And I thought that it was such a useful book because it sort of took me back in time to a period where I could experience that period through the artist's words. Yeah, and so I thought that was a very important text, and there should be more interviews like this that help people to understand their work through their own words. Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. The artist in context. And Dolores Wharton, I understand, was in the region from 1958, 1964, something like that. The book, like I said, came out in 1971. Anum, as an artist, do you see yourself and your practice as happening within a particular kind of period of time? I mean, are you self-conscious about being an artist of the late 20th century going into the 21st century? And I understand some of the questions that you ask, your milieu, your first impressions, the things that shaped your practice. Is there kind of focus a reflection on that? Call it dementia?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
So you're just living in time, as it were,
Yes,
is it?
yes.
Okay.
I mean, and then when somebody come and interview me, and interview us or me, pose all these questions, that's when I realize, oh, okay. I mean, that's how they see us as basically.
And so when you were asked the question about what were the early influences in your life,
Yeah.
with, I guess with regard to your practice, what was your answer?
I think I told about my trip to Italy, and I was seeing this.
And also
mural.
your Kelantan.
Oh
sort
yeah,
of
my
growing
Kelantan
up in
background
Kelantan.
and growing up. My dad was always doing watercolors on weekends. He painted also. He was also interested. He was a teacher, and
Right.
so we all did watercolors at home. And I remember when I was like in standard 1 and the first art class, I was doing portraits. And I was looking at the other kids, they were really horrible drawing. And I didn't realize that I was talented then. But it's more because we were always doing on weekends, you know. It's like a natural thing.
Right, and this is also this other interesting issue with regard to artists. And I've, been writing about art for several decades myself. And sometimes talking to an artist is
Yeah.
not the best way to understand their art. They're not necessarily the best. They're not necessarily the most articulate when it comes to saying what they do. And sometimes it seems like the critic is better off not talking to the artist and just looking at the work. I mean, where do you fall, Emilia, in terms of that?
Right.
Does the work speak for the artist, or is there value in actually speaking directly to the artist?
I think that's a very good question. I feel that when I'm doing the interview, I try to take a back seat and I try to let the artist talk as much as possible. And then I feel that I need to give the artist a lot of time because they need to, go back, go forward, go back in order to really articulate their sort of worldviews. And that's what I try to get from the artist. And I feel that that's the best way for me as a researcher or art writer. If I just look at the work, I miss out a lot on what's going on behind the work.
But that's kind of extra textual. It's something around the work and not just the work, right? So these stories that artists tell. I know, having said that about artists, some artists not being the most articulate, there are all these artists who are super articulate, especially about theory. And I want to come back to the issue of how artists learn a particular vocabulary in the next segment. So we're going to take a short break. We're going to be back. We're going to be talking to the author of this book, Living Art, as well as one of the contributors to this book. And stay tuned to Let's Talk. Hi, welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm Sharaad Kuttan. Today we're going to be talking about this book, A Living Art, the inspired lives of 14 Malaysian artists and their practice. I'm going to be speaking to the author, Emelia Ong, as well as Noor Mahnum Mohamed, or better known as Anu. She's a fine artist. She paints. She'll paint, I think is the way. Okay, we're talking about whether artists are articulate or not, and I do know these days, especially with artists coming through the academic studies, they're very, very inclined to use social theory, philosophy to describe their work. And did you find that in the 14 that you chose? Or is there sort of a generational issue when it comes to the artists that you chose here in this book?
Well, for instance, I think Professor Hasnul Saidon from Penang, because of his background as an academic as well as an artist, so he would a lot of times discuss more philosophical issues. Yeah, definitely. And so most of the artists, I think, who have an academic background tend to do that.
Right, so they already have a rich vocabulary in terms of what's been written about art and in art criticism and such, right?
Yes.
But what about the artist who's much more kind of I don't know what is the word to use. Is it naive or much more kind of direct and immediate in their relationship to their art?
Introvert.
Yeah, that always isn't mediated by theory, that isn't mediated by, you know, the world, the art world and art world speak. You know, I mean, Anam, you've always struck me as somebody who's very, very kind of like immediate in your response to things around you. Have you felt it necessary to find a kind of vocabulary that fits the new kind of, you know, the high theory and the, you know, the way in which the art world might revolve at certain levels?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I consider myself old school. I mean, I could relate or find affinity with like the Renaissance artists. I mean, in fact, my paper for my master's was about Leon Alberti, basically, about like hip artists. I mean, I have no idea.
Well, okay, but you know, which not to say that, you know, there's the previous generation, you mentioned Reza Piedasa, who's also very theoretical, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, in his approach to think, and conceptual art is here in some sense. Tell us a little bit, Emilia, about the artists you chose and why you chose them, 14 altogether.
Okay, I started out with Anum and Elias. I think those two were the foremost in my mind, mainly because I had been friends with them for a long time. I knew that they would be okay for me to being open about their work and being accessible, you know. So with those two, I was also interested then in, personally, I was fascinated with Sharon Chin's work and also with Hasnul's work. And then from that sort of four names, it just grew organically. And it was quite an intuitive process where I relied on these four artists to sort of also recommend other names that they think are very interesting. But in my mind, I had sort of like a mental list of the kind of media I wanted to include. For instance, like art activism or sculpture or printmaking, or, you know, so have a variety. And
okay, you wanted some diversity in the thing. And it comes back to a word that you know, Dolores Wharton uses in describing that initial invitation that you had to her to write the foreword, and you call it a coffee table book. And I thought it was quite interesting because it's there, and I wonder, is this a coffee table book?
I think it's grown into something much more than a coffee table book. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, because it is beautifully designed, and I must say the pictures, like, take a look at some of the images, and we'll share that on screen. They are actually, especially of the space that the artists use, I think, very telling. And because there we have Issei, because the late Issei there in your book. I do want to ask you, if Anum, do you think a young person wanting to get into art and wanting to take practice up as a profession, take it seriously, do you think this book might be useful for them?
Of course, because I still do it even though I'm not young. Look at other artists' studios, like on YouTube, there's several videos. I find it somehow more interesting when I see the studio of the artist. Also because I kind of look for things like, oh, what kind of studio furniture they use and things like that. In fact, I was telling Emilia today, Amy Shiran, the lady who painted Michelle Obama, so in her studio she had this trolley, I think from IKEA, or am I plugging IKEA?
It's okay.
Anyway, when I saw it, I said, exactly that's what I needed. So, hey, now.
So you're looking for ideas as well?
Ideas of the studio setup and things. Also technically, I mean, like you see the paint and how they lay out their paints and things like that. I mean, those kind of things you don't learn at school, basically.
And so it's a personal, practice is a kind of personal thing, right, journey. But tell us, Emilia, you know, did you want this to be a book where young people or young artists, or maybe people already in the field, might model themselves or seek to kind of reflect on their own practice by looking at what others were doing?
Yes, I think I wanted them to see the diversity, that there is in fact no one right way of doing this. Correct. And that if you look at it, you'll find that every artist, they have their own way. Yeah. Okay.
And it comes back to the question of demystification. Was the expression you used? What is it that you think is the mystique of the artist that you needed to kind of deconstruct or unravel?
I think it's the fact that a lot of people feel that and this artist is like a different sort of creature we can't understand them. You know, they're a little bit crazy. They're a little
Mad
bit
artist.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, mad artists, perhaps there's a little bit of magic in it. It might not even conform to our ideas of what work is. I mean, I think artists
Yes.
probably have to deal with the fact that a lot of people think that's not really, it's not real work. Oh, you're an artist, how sweet. And do you, as a woman, have to deal with the perceptions, public perceptions of what artists are, what they do, the value they bring, you know, whether this is a hobby, you know, oh yes, you know, it's kind of for the ladies, you know, kind of like if they're bored at home, they should take up watercoloring. Have you found that, experienced that?
Yes, but I'm at the age where I don't really care anymore about what other people.
But when you were younger, is that something that you had to encounter or you had to engage with?
Yes and no. I mean, I remember because I was doing my master's, blah, 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 and at that time I was married. And my husband, ex-husband, expected me when I finished my studies to work with him in his architectural office instead of setting up my own studio. And I think that's one of the reasons why we separated.
Because you weren't doing real work?
Because
as an
yeah,
artist?
so basically he doesn't take me seriously as an artist, I guess.
Do you think, Emilia, that artists still, in Malaysia at least, struggle with that their work is not valued by society generally as serious, of consequence, and ultimately, you know, something that they might encourage their children to pursue?
I think in general, I would say yes, there is still, people
Yeah.
don't still regard it as a sort of serious work, a serious way of living. I mean, it's such a meaningful way of living.
Okay, we'll take another short break and we'll be back. We're talking about this book, Living Art. Stay tuned to Let's Talk. Okay, welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm Sharaad, with me Emilia, and Anum. Emilia is the author of this book, Living Art, the inspired lives of 14 Malaysian artists and their practice. And Anum is a well-known artist herself who's contributed a chapter, she's, well, featured rather, in one of the chapters, one of the 14 artists that, Emilia, you picked. Now, you know, Emilia, many people who write books and put books together, and it's a beautiful thing that's come out. Congratulations on that. You might have regrets, some things that you wish you'd put into the book that didn't go into the book. Do you have, are there gaps in the storytelling here that you would like to see filled with the next book or by others in their own projects?
I think definitely there were a lot of artists that I would have liked to include. Working in so many different other media, like site-specific works, like Chinese traditional painting. It's really interesting, ceramics, you know. So there were a lot of other artists, but due to time constraints, I couldn't include all of them.
Right. So this would be just more artists, more stories.
Yes.
And I'll come back to that because I have a follow-up question to that. But I want to ask you, Anum, were there things that in this chapter featuring you that you said that you wish you hadn't said? Do you regret now that everybody can see your studio and see how obsessively neat you are in your studio? I don't know if you cleaned it up because it looks, you know, like obsessively neat. Things that you might have revealed about yourself that you didn't intend to?
Well, I'm fine with it because now I've moved to a new studio, so that's all story. I think I kind of answered most of her question. I think the part that I hold back basically is personal matters and things like that, because it kind of intertwined with, you know, your life. And what I do for a living is painting, so it's kind of like everything is mashed together. So.
Yeah, I mean, do you find that, you know, there was always a resistance? I mean, how far, Emilia, could you get in the storytelling, in terms of the processes, the thinking about the work, you know, that might take place in darker moments or maybe in the full glare of the sun, but, you know, whatever it is, were there things that you didn't want to tell or couldn't, or you pulled yourself back from putting into the book?
Yes, actually there was a lot of editing involved, and I think I have to be very sensitive to the artist. If I feel that they have given me more private information than they really wanted to, I pull it back, because I want to keep that trust between myself and the artist, you know.
Yeah, and how much, because we all love gossip and we all love to peer deeply into the lives of, and this is what artists do. In fact, artists in many ways peer deep into our souls, right? So this is a bit of payback time, right? In some ways. Do you think that there's any value in getting into the deep, dark places that every artist, because they are in fact individuals and flawed and so on and so forth, is there any value in that?
I think there is. I think people already know that in a way. And I think there's no need for me to actually put it in the book.
Okay, it might be a bit gratuitous. Though I must say that there are any number of biographies written, especially of dead artists, where it becomes extraordinarily revealing when you learn about their struggles with their sexuality or with their society. You know, the fact that you're a woman artist, do you think Anum has played a large part in the kind of art that you make?
Of course, yeah, definitely.
And did you tell Emilia that story? The story of being a woman artist in Malaysia?
I'm gonna write a memoir. No, I don't know. I mean, the question was quite direct about painting technique and all that. I didn't think you asked any personal questions, no?
Oh, okay. I get the hesitation. Okay, what's next for you, Emilia? When you said you might include more people,
Yeah,
right?
I think that's
thing.
one idea. Yeah.
But what about approaches? I mean, what paths of questioning would you change if this has, focused largely on the space they create and their practice?
Actually, I was thinking a really interesting project would be to do little videos, a similar style to this book, but to do it as short videos, because that's what people love to watch right now. They love watching short videos on YouTube, right? So that would be a great way to, I think, let the public in on behind the scenes of the contemporary artists of Malaysia. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Nanum? Do you think there's a space for a novel, perhaps, about artists, or a deep, biopic of some of our famous artists? You know,
Yes,
people, where we can actually plumb the depths of their souls.
Yep.
Who would you like, if you could choose an artist that you would like to hear more about, and really kind of full account of their lives, who would you go back in time and?
I would actually like to know more about our senior artists like Latif Muhyiddin, Sharifah Fatimah Zubair. There's not enough, to me, information about them available behind the scene. I mean, there's catalogs of their works, or also what's the name? No, we're going to the
Well, okay, there's Reza Piedasa, because died several years ago as well. What about you? I mean, if there was a movie rather than short videos, I understand the appeal, but they don't maybe allow for that kind of exploration. Who would you explore if you were commissioned to do a kind of serious biographical sketch?
Wow, that's a good question.
Yeah, and it's a question, I guess, that we all, I think in the arts community, valuing the lives of our artists, might think about where and who's going to do this work, and whether we're going to be putting money behind this and resources, right? Very, very important.
Yes.
Because without money and resources, this book would never have been published. I'd like to thank the publishers.
Crowdfunded, right?
Crowdfunded, absolutely. Eureka Books for putting this together. Emilia, of course, for writing it. Anum for saying yes to being a part of this project.
Thank you.
Thank you both for being on the show. It's been a lovely conversation. I've been speaking to Emelia Ong and Anum, or Noor Mahnum Mohamed. She's one of the artists featured in this book, Living Art, The Inspired Lives of 14 Malaysian Artists and Their Practice, published by Eureka Books in Penang. I'm Sharaad Kuttan. This has been Let's Talk, only on Astro AWANI.